do have to give a little bit of a way of preface on this one, which is that this will be my first time trying to teach this publicly. I do learn it every year, and as should you, because there's an instruction, actually, hold on a second. Yeah, you can take one of those. There's an instruction from the Rebbeim that anyone who's going to blow the shofar, who's going to be a Baal Tokei and blow the shofar for other people on Rosh Hashanah, which actually is all of us, because we have a custom of going and doing mifzoim with the shofar. So it's definitely very customary for everyone in the yeshiva after the meal on Rosh Hashanah to go out and find people in the street, and as you've seen, there's many of them, and blow the shofar. So first of all, we'll have to learn the laws of blowing the shofar very well, the skill of blowing the shofar very well, but most importantly, the kavanas. I don't know if it's most importantly, but it's definitely right up there. These are the ones you want. The kavanas of blowing the shofar. Now, the truth is, there's like Kabbalistic kavanas, and I saw them. They print them in the book over here, just to show you how like kind of out there this is. This is the kavanas of the Arizal. Just so our live viewers for a second first. But if you take a look at these, it goes literally blow by blow with the Arizal. If you can see over here, it's like, here's your first tekiah. Oh, I skipped the page. Here's your first tekiah, then trua, and you're supposed to be thinking that Avram goes here, and this Sphira goes here, and this Netzach goes into Chochmah. It's like a very mamash Kabbalistic crazy thing. I don't necessarily recommend it for the faint of heart, but apparently the Baal Shem Tov had his own set of kavanas, which actually, according to our writings here, were lost to us, but the Alter Rebbe's explanation on those kavanas is what we're going to learn. So it's really like more like a Chabad philosophical treatise of like the mystical meaning of the shofar and what it accomplishes in reality. But I guess one of the reasons I haven't taught it very often is because it's not an easy level mimer, not necessarily because the content is so complicated, but more because just the language of the Alter Rebbe is a little bit itself difficult if you're not used to the Alter Rebbe. In any case, I don't want to scare anyone. It's an amazing mimer. And the minhag is to learn it every single Rosh Hashanah, on the day of Rosh Hashanah, the morning of Rosh Hashanah, the whole mimer, before you go and take upon yourself this amazing, awesome task of blowing the shofar. So it's actually a very practical piece of Hasidus. It's one of like the most classic mimarim. Everybody's essentially supposed to know this, and yet we don't find that it's taught very much publicly. It's hard to find shiurim on it and so forth. So we'll be the guinea pig. Yeah. Did you want to ask something?
Yes. Does this make sense?
I can't see that far away, brother.
Yeah. What's the name of the mimer again?
It's called. I'm sorry. I just my handicap there. It says Lahavin in Tekiah Shofar. That's the name of the mimer technically. I do want to point out some, just again by way of preface, this is some interesting things to know. This is in a book called Tefilas Mikol Hashana. All right, so what this is also famously referred to as Siddur Im Dach. What does Dach refer to? The word Dach, Divrei Elokim Chaim, which is like the words of the living God, was another name for Hasidus. They called Hasidus words of the living God, because that's what it is. And so one of the great classic works of the Alter Rebbe, which is a little bit less, I would say a lot less known than, let's say, his classic works, certainly of the Tanya, but even of Torah Or and Likutei Torah, sort of the next in line of, in his Hasidic works of like their power and awesomeness, is probably this book called the Siddur Im Dach. It's brought down in many, many, many Maimorim all throughout Hasidus. And really what it is, it goes through the Siddur, and it explains the Siddur according to Hasidus. Then it goes through all the holidays and explains all the holidays according to Hasidus. There's the Shar of Purim, the Shar of Hanukkah, the Shar of Rosh Hashanah, the Shar of Sukkot. It's like you could have this book and a Siddur, and probably that's all you need for Hasidus. It's very, very powerful.
Isn't that what we were learning with Shammai last night?
Yeah. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Well, that's a big crazy thing. So I wonder if you weren't learning the same mimer.
No.
A different one?
Yeah.
Okay, that's handy. We didn't really work that out together, but I'm glad. Do you know which mimer you were learning with him?
Oh, what was it called?
Yeah, it was about
Yeah.
Somebody's got to know, guys.
What was it called?
There's a lot of mimarim and Rosh Hashanah in here. Nobody knows.
Yeah, it was.
It was definitely on Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, it was about Rosh Hashanah.
Tiku B'chodesh Shofar.
Yeah.
You got to get those titles down. You got to know what you're learning. That was it?
It was, yeah, you talking
Alright, so
about
that's-
the Chodesh, the month.
Yeah, okay, so that's a very great hashkacha pratis. That now you're going to learn another piece of that. It's really all one long mimer, the Rosh Hashanah mimerim of this book. So we're kind of in the end of it, where it talks about the Indian of the shofar. Okay, so that's enough by way of introduction. So everyone will take it with me inside. It's on page 714. You okay this morning?
Really?
Yeah. Okay. 714, and it starts with Lahavin Inyan Tekiya Shofar Al Pi Kavanas Of Shem Tov Zal. If somebody asks you what mimer you're learning in the morning, what are you going to say? Lahavin Inyan Tekiya Shofar. So you got to know what mimer you're in. You got to kind of keep all these different topics together. So what that means, to understand the concept of blowing the shofar according to the Kavanas of the Baal Shem Tov Zal. As I mentioned to you before, those unique Kabbalistic Kavanas of the Baal Shem Tov did not reach our hands, but nonetheless, this is the explanation of them in a more intellectually satisfying way than just
Rosh Chodesh.
Shar Rosh HaChodesh, Shar Rosh Hashanah. Right, Tikku B'Chodesh Shofar. Yeah, so it's the beginning of these very memoirs. That's good. Okay, so that's amazing. Shema and I think alike. So it says, Dehine yesh lahakdim techila hakdama echas. So in order, if you want to understand the shofar, you have to first preface one preface. Yaakov, you need room over here? Yesh lahakdim techila hakdama echas. You need one preface before you even get into understanding this. Be'inyan kol v'dibur. And that is the difference between kol v'dibur, which means the voice and the speech, right? V'hu asher anu roim b'kol v'dibur, that we see when it comes to speech and the voice and speech. A little bit got cut off for you guys, only like a word or two, so you just follow me. We see when it comes to voice and speech, yesh b'chinis Moshe, can you guys maybe either go outside or stand behind the machitza? It's like you're right at me with the. I'm having a hard time concentrating when you're talking. Would you guys mind finding a spot that's not? Thank you. I'm fine with that. Sorry to trouble you. Okay, so anyway, let's preface with the Indian of speech and voice and speech, right? The Indian, the anu roim b'kol v'dibur, we see when it comes to the voice and the speech, sheish b'chinas mamutza bein kol v'adibur, that there's an intermediary between the voice and the speech. She'einu be'erech hakol v'gam lo be'erech hadibur, and this intermediary is not really on the level of the voice, nor is it on the level of the speech exactly, of the words. Because what we say the voice, what do we actually mean when we say the voice? It's the actual simple voice, which is a composition of amar. What does amar stand for?
Say.
No, yeah, it means say, but amar is a rosh tevas for Maim, Ruach, and Afar, right? Or Avir, I think. Maim, Ruach, Afar. Right? So basically, these three components. No, Eish. Sorry, Eish, Maim, Ruach. My bad. It's Eish, Maim, Ruach. So these three components, right, are essentially the pure power of the voice, right? Like, in other words, what is your voice composed of? It's some kind of like a mystical fusing of the elements of fire, water, and air, right? Which is, it comes purely from we're going to see what's called this hevel halev, like the breath of the heart produces the voice. We're talking about just when you sing like a note, but it's actually even before you even sing a note and anything comes out of your mouth, the pure voice is almost like a pre-sound. And it's just composed of these like very refined elements. It's kind of a funny thing that we talk about it like in water, fire, and air. Obviously, we're not talking about those physical things, right? But we're talking about like the underlying composition of all matter is made out of fire, water, air, and earth, right? And some kind of, even water, I think we spoke about this in another class, has fire and earth and air in it. Even fire has water in it, right? Because there's like these four essential elements sort of combine and create physicality. So what he's saying is the voice is something like extremely, extremely spiritual and subtle. It doesn't even have the element of afar in it, of earth. It's just composed of fire, water, and air. V'nikra ruach o hevil bilvad. It's called like a breath, or a hevel is also like comes to the word breath, right? Ve'enu begeder osios hadibur klal, and this like pure voice of the heart, which essentially what he's going to say is you've really never heard this before. This is like a power of the like almost spiritual voice. And it is so refined and it's so deep inside of you that it doesn't even have any connection whatsoever with joining on to letters and speech. In order to do so, it can, as we're going to say, it's going to need an intermediary. B'chinas inyan hadibur, where what is speech? By the way, that point of the voice will come clearer after we hear a little bit more fleshed out. B'chinas inyan hadibur, what is speech? Hu dafka b'chinas havaras osios mechulakim. So this is the definition of speech, is when you have this sort of utterance of the letters which are divided and drawn out all into different manners, right? And combinations combined together. So the speech is basically when you have the letters all broken up into little pieces, okay, and divided from each other. And therefore, that stage of having letters divided up and broken up into parts versus the voice, which is like this pure pre-sound, if you will, of pure fire, air, and water sort of emerging from the depths of your heart, they're so distant from each other that they really can't join. And unfortunately, you can't have speech without voice, and right? Because it's the underlying sound behind the speech. Whenever you're going to say anything, it comes out in a tone and in certain frequency, like there's a voice behind it. But the voice in itself, when it comes purely from the heart, is at such a reverberating, such a high, refined level that is actually incomparable to the divided up letters of speech. Right? They're very different from each other. That voice which comes straight out of the heart. Amnam anu roim, however, we see shakol vadibur yesh lem chibur v'tzkashu zeh mizeh. Nonetheless, they always come together, even though they're infinitely distant from each other in their basic nature. They always come together because we see that the voice and the speech join, right? And when you hear anyone talking, you're hearing what? A combination of their voice and letters, right? That are like somehow fused magically together, creating this speech that they're having. And the idea is that the pure voice, how do you wind up having it come out as speech? It comes out in what's called the 5 distinctions of the mouth, or the 5 structures of the mouth. And they are divided into the letters of speech. What are the 5 structures of the mouth? Anybody know?
Yeah.
Is this what we learned in Old Pond?
Yeah, it's what we learned.
Like the
Brahma,
Yep.
dental,
Right.
I don't know.
Gichak.
yeah.
Right, which is what?
Gimel,
I'm saying what part of the mouth is that?
the back,
The throat,
yeah.
right?
Dental's the teeth.
Yeah, you got your
Mouth is
teeth,
the
your
mouth.
throat,
And the lips,
your lips,
tongue.
your tongue, your palate, right? So you have 5 different, basically structures, little mechanism, right? It's actually, no one thinks about these things on a daily basis unless you're in Ulpan class, but it's like, a crazy thing that you're sort of just like, put all this together with these unique, clicking sounds and teeth and lips and throat and all of a sudden you just like create all these divided letters, and there's groupings of letters, right, that come primarily from the lips, or groupings of letters that come primarily from the throat or from the palate or from the tongue, right? And really all the letters in a certain sense use the whole mouth, but the primary drive behind certain letters is one of these 5 hotzaot. They're called like basically bringings out of the sound. So what happens is the simple voice, it comes out and sort of gets manipulated through these 5 structures of the mouth, right? And that's what winds up dividing it up into the letters of speech, right? just thinking about that is just like wild, right? It's like we're just like streaming out this voice and like chopping it up with these like instantaneously with all these like powers of the mouth with some kind of intelligence behind it. It comes out in your ear, you catch it. We're like having a conversation. The whole thing is like wild if you think about it, right? It is. Kamosha Kasub is Zohar, right? And the Zohar explains the kol v'dibur hem kamo klalu prat. Right? The Zohar kind of brings this down and says that the voice and the speech are considered like a klal and a prat. We've learned, Baruch Hashem, a lot of times in Chassidus, what's the difference of what's a klal and prat? Can someone help me out? What's a klal and prat? Yeah.
It's general and a detail.
Good, general and specific, right? Which means basically you have everything contained in like sort of one place, and then it specifies itself out. We find this oftentimes in halacha, right? That you have a general statement, and then it will break down into detailed of that statement. In other words, like for example, like the Matzorah, it says you shall shave your whole body, and it says shave your eyebrows, shave your head, like shave your head, right? It brings a general, then it brings a specific. So in more spiritual terms, is the idea of sort of how certain spheros contain all other spheros in them. Like for example, Chokhmah is like the great klal, right, which contains all the other 9 spheros in it, and then they start getting detailed and delineated out when they come out of their womb, or like a seed, right? It could theoretically have the whole tree inside of there with the roots and the stem and the branches and the leaves and the fruits and everything, but it's all inside the seed. It's in a state of a klal. It's all contained inside, and then it delineates out in all the pratim and all the details. So he says that the voice and the speech in the Zohar are called klal and prat. Right? And he says that the prat tzrich lichlal, the klal tzrich liprat. And the rule is the details need the general, and the general needs the details. The details for certainly need the general, because the details are only a manifestation of the general, right? They don't exist on their own. They only exist because there's something which is producing them, which is their klal. But the klal needs the parts as well. Because what is the klal? Other than a combination of all these parts contained in some seminal point, right? So they're basically like two sides of the same coin. The klal needs the prat, and the prat needs the klal. But the idea is sheyesh b'chinas mamutza hamechabra. So we're trying to make the point that the pure voice is something that arguably like you've never really even ever heard. Because it comes like directly from, where does your voice come from? He's explaining here also something like physiological, which we don't think about very much. But the voice is really produced from the heart, apparently, right? And there's like something called the breath of the heart. And it's like it's really like an emanation of your emotion, which at its very core is really before, it's like pre-sound. It doesn't make a sound on its own, because it is something which is just purely fire, water, and air, like coming from the breath of your heart. And yet it is supposed to manifest itself in this speech that a person hears. So how is this high-level, highfalutin spiritual entity supposed to mingle in with these clumsy 5 parts of the mouth, which are like very physical and producing, chopping up the air? He says they need an intermediary. They can't actually join as they are. Something has to join them together. And that's what we see. With our very senses, you can tell, you can see this. This is something that anyone can pick up. That you cannot draw forth the breath of the heart into the breath of the mouth. Usually when you use the word breath, you're talking about something that comes out of your mouth. That's already a second stage to what we were calling before the breath of the heart, the source of the voice. So we see that you cannot bring the breath of the heart and create it to come out as the breath of the mouth, without mixing at least one letter in there, and it's called an aleph. Sounds strange when you first hear it, but it makes a lot of sense in a minute. Right? There's one letter called the aleph, which has to emerge in order to join together the breath of the heart with and turn it into what we actually call voice, and to come out of the mouth. Ki below havaras os aleph, without the expression of the aleph, you won't hear this simple voice of the heart as an actual entity at all. Because when the voice comes out, when the voice comes out and it's heard, you're always going to hear it as a certain letter called aleph, right? And kamo ah or ha or o or a, right? So you can vowelize the aleph in different ways, but you're vowelizing a letter. Whenever you just sing a simple melody, a wordless sound that comes out of your mouth, any sound that you emit, you don't realize it, but you're already pronouncing a certain letter. You might think, I'm not saying letters yet. I'm like, before I get into dividing my pure voice into letters, I just want to emit a sound. You have to realize that sound is already coming through a particular letter. Because in order to be verbalized and vocalized, it has to meet some kli, right? Some type of vessel which enables the pure voice of the heart to actually make sound. And that is the letter, that's what we call vowels, right? In regular language. And there's no such thing as like a vowel without vowelizing a letter. You're always vowelizing a letter. There's no, like, it's not always pronounced for me, patach, right? So you're already saying, patach already has a pei and a chaf. You can't just vowelize the symbol patach without some sound coming out of your mouth. And if sound is coming out and you're saying ah, because a patach makes an ah sound, you're already saying, if you would draw that on the board, it would be an aleph with a patach underneath. That's how you say ah. There is no just simple vowel sound that you can make without first having a letter, which is then bringing that vowel sound out of your mouth. You understand what I'm saying?
I get that, but aren't there other sounds that don't involve an aleph that you could
Like
say?
what?
Like,
No, he's talking about voice. That's not a voice. That's when you go. There's no. That's like hitting It's a mechanical like clapping of your hands. Where we're talking as producing sound from your heart, clicking letters, like or chomping your teeth. No, there's no voice coming out. You can if you're going to go ta and make a sound, that's different. But you go. It's like clapping your hands. That's not an actual voice. Any voice that you're going to make has to have some kind of a vowel sound, right? You're talking about consonants right now.
yeah.
Consonants alone without vowels is not really called fusing kol and dibur, voice and speech. You're just basically clapping your hands, right? You're making you're slapping two parts of your body together. That's not called producing sound from your heart, right? Voice is sound from your heart. Where it's like, it makes sound, it makes noise, like a I don't know what's the difference between a noise of clapping your hand and the noise of your voice.
Where's it coming from?
But of course, it's an obvious difference.
This-
Like it's a reverberation.
One's much like it sounds different for sure. Yeah.
Not just sounds different. It's coming from a completely different place. One is like being produced from your emotions, basically. You're emanating voice versus just clapping your hands. I don't know why this is hard for me to describe the difference, but it's like you can't have any more greater difference than that.
But can't you express emotion with like a?
You can express emotion with your eyebrows if you want to,
So-
but we're talking about voice right now. When you express emotion with your eyebrows, you're not using voice. The hevel halev, the breath of the heart, does not come out when you express emotion with your eyebrows.
But it's from the hearts too, as well.
You can, all emotions basically can be expressed through clapping the hands, can be expressed through jumping and dancing,
And they all stem from the heart, just not the breath of the heart.
but not the breath of the heart. The heart itself actually like emits something
Maybe
when
it's
you
all
wanna,
out.
when it wants to cry out, so to speak, and say something.
This will have voice and not sound. That's the difference.
The voice and not sound. Okay, that's pretty
Like,
solid.
this is just sound.
Right.
It's like this. That's what we mean, like clapping the hands. It's
Right.
sound we're doing.
It's not a voice. Okay, that's good.
Right? No, what we're saying here, which is interesting, is you might think I'm not saying any letters when I just say, like if I would say, I don't know exactly how I feel about this, then there's letters, right? I just kind of wrapped that sound into letters. But if I just go, you think you didn't say any letters yet. Wrong. I said at least one letter. Because I can't even make that sound unless at least the aleph is vowelized. But something has to be vowelized in order for it to sort of come out. And what he's saying is that original aleph is what's called the mamutza. It is an intermediary between the pure sound and the rest of the letters. There has to be something in between, which is going to explain a little bit more about what a mamutza is. But it's like I'm going to sort of jump the gun. It's the lowest part of the heart. And it's the highest concept of letters, and it therefore can bridge the two and make the pure breath of the heart now have a way of joining with the hotzaos hapeh, with the construction and of the letters of the mouth.
The lowest part of the letters, not the lowest.
No, it's the highest part of the letters,
The highest part of
the lowest part of the breath of the heart, right? It's the intermediary, so it's basically the bottom of one and the top of the other. It's joining the voice with the letters, so it's basically the lowest part of the voice, right? The voice itself really is beyond letters, but if you're gonna say one letter, give me like an aleph, and that'll be sort of like I'm only dealing with the aleph. Don't give me any pays and vases and says the breath of the heart. He's like, I'm not on the level of aleph at all. If you want to say that, like I'm of letters at all. If you want to say like I'll take one letter that I can like hang out with, it'll be the aleph, right? Then I can at least vowelize my pure breath. And once it becomes vowelized in a breath and you're now making sound, now you have all free will to chop up that sound like Morse code and basically create distinct letters from it. But that voice always has to be coming out, right? As long as you're like saying something, if the voice would run out, you'd have nothing left to power the letters. There's that energy of the voice coming through and that's why you have to take a breath sometimes. Right? Because you have to maintain that pure voice at all times. And while your mind is quickly, geniusly chopping it up into meaningful syllables, right? You cannot ever let go of the breath. It's like a trumpet player, right? You can have like this beautiful phrase, but if you stop breathing into the trumpet and blowing out of it, you can move your fingers all you want. You're not playing music anymore, right? You have to maintain this underlying flow of voice. And in order for the voice to even occur, there has to be an initial aleph that the voice is fusing with. And so basically everything you're saying is like an aleph constantly flowing and being chopped up and manipulated as through the other letters. So there's three functions of every time you say anything. It's the pure breath of the heart fusing with the aleph, and then the aleph, and now vocalized aleph is like sort of staying there constantly, and the five constructions of the mouth are taking that existent level of voice and chopping it up and dividing it up into different syllables and letters and speech. That's what's happening all the time.
Why is it the lowest part of the heart?
We'll see. It's basically. We'll see. It's going to explain. I kind of gave away a little bit too much here, but we'll see it inside now. All right. So I just got to the point where it says that first, you see that first big aleph, ha, that's where we got up to. Page Shin Nun Ches. Yeah, is everyone with me?
Yep.
Okay, so is it kamo or ha, v'kal yotze, or anything like that? Or it could be with a different vowel sound. In other words, you're not stuck with a patach. It could be o or a. As long as you have some aleph coming out with some vowel, you're now accessing the breath of the heart. O b'havaras os acher. It doesn't have to be an aleph per se. You can throw another letter into the mix, but you always have to have that aleph joined with it. In other words, if you're going to say ga or da or fa, it's fine that you sort of like slapped on a consonant, but the truth is the consonant alone, consonant or consonant?
Consonant.
With a T?
Well, it has a T-
Consonant?
No, consonant. Yeah.
Consonant.
Right?
I don't know. That's why I asked.
It's not two T's. It's not consonant.
No, it's not constant.
It's consonant. With
Okay,
one T at
the
the end.
consonant, right, it's not getting in the way, but it's not the one that's responsible for making the sound. It's the vowel that is underneath that. Ga, da. In other words, but you always have to have this, right, or u, avabli havaras os klal, but without saying some letter, right, which is going to be vowelized. Lo yimtza mitzias hakol klal. You can't find the voice to come out without some letter being like sort of its carrier, its conduit. You can't just hear the pure voice. Actually, it's something deep inside the heart which does not emerge unless it mixes with some catalyst. Amnam afal pisha nishma kol bavaras os aleph kamo a or a. Even though the voice, right, can be heard with this expression of the one letter aleph, that sound that you make or a is actually not the whole letter aleph. Kamoshu Baba Osius Adibur, because there's a reason why Aleph is Aleph, right? Which is basically when you say the word Aleph, the letter Aleph, when you say the letter Aleph in full, as this, like an independent piece of speech, when you want to say out of your mouth the whole letter Aleph, the Hechrech Yomar Gimel Osiot, you have to say 3 letters. Come on, Aleph, Lamed, Pei, right? You have to, when you say the letter Aleph, you are saying by definition 3 letters, right, that are combined together, which is Aleph, Lamed, Pei, right?
Okay.
So when I say merely even though I'm saying that there's an Aleph attached to it, it's not really the full letter Aleph. The full letter Aleph, you draw it on the board, you say this is an Aleph, this is a base. You don't pronounce. That's actually one of the great differences between Lashon HaKodesh and every other language, I think, on the earth. I don't think there is another language. You could prove me wrong, maybe with some language I've never heard of before. But every other language, you say like A, B, C, right? The letters themselves is just one sound, right? What's another language, right? I don't know another language is, right? But in other words, there's only Hebrew where the letter itself is a word in a certain sense, right? Like why is the lamed and a fei involved in my conversation when I want to say aleph? Right? I just want to say a. You keep it simple. You're trying to teach. What's that?
How is lamed?
Because when you say aleph, there's a lamed in an aleph. When you say aleph, there's a fei in an aleph. So if I want to just draw the letter aleph, and I want to say like, what is this? You don't just say like if I draw an A in English on the board, you say, what is this? You say or b, right? B. It's basically just that consonant vowelized. But with a Hebrew letter, the letters themselves have more to them than just a simple syllable, right? They have 3 distinct letters inside of them, most of them, right?
So you're saying like when someone says
Mm-hmm.
someone says like
What I point right now exactly when someone says they're not saying the letter aleph.
Yeah. Like you could say that person can like pause the video or whatever and be like, this letter it's actually spelled out with 3 extra letters like aleph, A-L-F. So like you'll be like, oh, there's actually like a deeper there's deeper than just There's like the way you spell it out in Hebrew is A-L-F.
That's right.
That's it?
That's what I'm trying to say. But the point is therefore when you do vocalize your heart breath, right? The hevel halev, and we were saying it won't come out unless you attach a letter to it, and that letter is an aleph. It's not actually the whole aleph, right? It's just like the sort of origin of the aleph. But if you want to actually say in speech a whole aleph, you don't just say you say 3 different letters. Aleph, right? And if you don't say all those 3 letters, you have not actually given over a person the symbol of the aleph in speech. I was going to say this is one of the things that Friedrich Rebbe really fought for, right? In like communist Russia, they were trying to modernize Hebrew Jewish education, and he was fighting tooth and nail that they shouldn't like mix their dirty hands into like how we teach our children for thousands and for millennia. And one of the things they were doing is like, what is your like way of teaching children letters is like way too confusing. Like you should do it like phonetically, like aleph is base is bay, like b. Don't like we had this way of going kametz aleph kametz base ba. Kametz gimel ga, and this is how we teach children, like a very methodical way. First, tell them the vowel, then you tell them the letter, then you tell them how the vowel and the letter come together. So they were like, "This is too complicated. You just let's just go A B C D E F." Or like you guys learn like the song also in class, which is probably incorrect, right? When your Ulpan teacher teaches you, theoretically, he should teach you like in the ancient tradition of Yisrael Saba. Like we don't say Aleph, base, gimel, dalet, hey. That's not really how you're supposed to teach your children how the alphabet, because the way that it permeates into your mind. We say kametz aleph kametz base ba. It's a whole mystical thing that does something to you. The point I'm trying to make is you have to actually say the full letter, because that is the depiction of this letter. It's not just an right? The afal pisha gam bedibur. So what he's trying to, let me just preface because it gets a little confusing here. What he's trying to say is that this aleph, which is the intermediary between the voice and the speech, it's not actually the letter aleph, because the letter aleph is already in the realm of speech. It's already a divided with the five hotzaos hapeh. It's already like any other aspect of speech when you're actually going to say the letter aleph. What we're talking about is the intermediary between speech and voice. So it's just like it's the origin of the aleph. It's not the actual letter aleph, because that would already be in the realm of speech. And if it's already in the realm of speech, it's not called an intermediary. Something which is an intermediary is neither voice nor speech, right? It's something which is it's like kind of hanging in the middle of both of them, and therefore able to join them together. That's why he's pointing out that what we're talking about when we say that you need this letter aleph, it's really just like the original kli of sound that allows the breath of the voice to come out as a sound, as opposed to being so refined that it can't come out at all. Because the actual letter aleph is already a piece of speech. What's that?
But there's two parts, right? The way you pronounce the letter and the sound of the letter. When I say ani, I don't say aleph ni.
No, that's what he gets to right now. He says right now as well. He says, so you might want to say that even when you say any word, you're not really saying the whole of those letters, right? That's the next line. Even though also when you speak, when you say one word, which is going to be sort of any word is going to be some kind of a combination of all the different structures of your mouth. Kamo amar, for example, like the word amar. When you say a word like amar, you're also saying the aleph without saying aleph, right? You're not, when you say the word amar, you're not saying aleph mem resh. That's not how you say the word amar. You also kind of cut it short, right? You say the aleph without its, what's a miloi? The miloi means the other letters that spell the letter. So like the lamed and the pei would be called the miloi, the filling in of the aleph. Does everyone understand that?
Yeah.
Right? So what would be the miloi of, let's say, for example, mem? Mem, right? Mem is the miloi of mem. And the miloi of resh? Right? Yud shin, right? Yud shin, because when you make a resh, right? The resh is the first letter, and then it's filled in. It's called the miloi with the other letters in the word resh, which is yud shin. So what he's saying here is when you say the word amar, right? It's kind of like saying You're not saying the whole aleph. You're not saying all the miluim of those letters when you say any word, right? You cut it off and you just say the first part. You're not saying the lamed and you're not saying the pei in the amar. Zeu dafka bar kavas ha'osios v'tzivufeihem. He says, okay, so you kind of got me there, he's saying, but like, that's only when you are going to put a whole word together and join letters together and combine them, when they join together. But in other words, you're going to say any of the individual letters, in order to identify, I wish I had a board, but like here's an aleph, right? You have a symbol of an aleph. You want to identify that thing. You need its own individual speech, and it has aleph, lamed, pei. But if you're going to say a word where now you're combining letters, so you don't need to say every single miloi of those letters, but you're still, but that's only because you're combining the letters into a different type of. In other words, aleph is one piece of speech, amar is a different piece of speech, but they're both in the realm of dibur. It's just when you say an individual letter, it's different than saying a grouping of letters, but they're both called not voice, they're both called speech. What do I care if it's aleph, lamed, pei, or aleph, mem, resh? In other words, it's some kind of a combination of letters which gets you into breaking down the voice into its pratim and its details. It's just that when you combine a few letters together and you make a word, it has a different combination than when you just say the letter alone. But in principle, it's the same thing. When you say a word, obviously you don't say each letter with its miloi. That would be a very strange language. Right? It's just however that particular word comes out in the voice alone. Right? It's only when you join 2 or 3 letters together, like the 3 letters of Amar, And when these letters come out in the sound, kol echad b'fnei atzmo mischabrim b'dibur echad. Then they like, in other words, you're going to say these three letters as they're joined together. It comes out as one aspect of speech, right? If you would say each word, each letter alone, aleph, mem, resh, that would be like three distinct pieces of speech. If you put them together, it's one distinct piece of speech called amar. But the point is, you're still making a letter combination. Ki gam ha'osio shel hadibur hem b'chinas kol. Because even when you're going to say letters inside of a speech, there's still a voice underlying them. Just like, for example, we said when you're saying aleph, the word aleph, there has to be, like I said before, a stream of sound coming out, which is like that vowel sound, and then you can cut it up with your aleph and your pei. But if there wasn't that essential aleph sound, that voice coming out, you wouldn't be able to break it up. The same thing is when you say amar, right? You have to have a stream of voice coming out in order to break it down to letters. Rakshim b'chinas havara v'kol makor lahem, dios havara b'chituch osio shel hakol dafka. V'dai l'meid. Okay, aval k'shemedaber rak os echad, os aleph b'dibur, but you're going to say the whole letter aleph with speech, then certainly you're going to have to say it with its miloi, with all of its three letters. K'mo reish, v'tzadik, v'taf, v'kahai gavna, like any of the letters. Masha enki v'os aleph anishma v'kol pashut. Not so when you're talking about the type of os of the letter aleph, which is said as, so to speak, as part of the simple voice. There, you're only using like the essence of the aleph, as it were, not the actual speech, right? Dibur is when you've already got a bunch of letters combined together. Whether it's aleph or amar, you're already in the realm of dibur. When you're talking about the aleph, which is attached to the simple voice, that it does not come together with its miloi. Okay, but dilemma. Is everyone more or less following this? I kind of lost you at the end there, but yeah.
With each utterance of each like consonant in Hebrew, there is more parts of it that make up the sum of the total parts. So the word amar, just amar, it's aleph, mem, resh.
Right.
We say amar,
right,
but there's more value to it. There's deeper value to it. There might be. I think what you're alluding to is that there's more meaning to it as well.
I wasn't alluding to that. You're right. In other words, this is like the beauty of the Hebrew language, is that every word has all kinds of deep mystical depth, because I'll tell you, it goes even further than what you're saying, right? Let's say you want to say the word amar. Yeah. So really, instead of having three letters, how many letters do you really have? The aleph is its own three letters, right? The mem is already two letters. And the resh is three letters. So you don't have a word of three letters there. If you're going to bring out the true value of that, you already have 8 letters, right? But you can go deeper than that, because in the aleph itself, which you already broke it down to 3 letters, that aleph itself is made out of letters, right? Aleph, lamed, pei, inside of that aleph. So it's like each word is like an endless stream of like zeros and ones, basically. Like so in that capacity, when you're talking about the letters themselves, how they can break down, there's infinite meaning there, and that's like its own cool topic, right? But what we're actually saying right now is something slightly different. We're just trying to make the point that I don't care if you're going to combine a bunch of letters together, right? You're basically you're always going to have, whether those letters is the word aleph or the word amar, right? You're dealing with the realm called speech. You're already basically breaking something down into its details and chopping up the voice through the 5 parts of the mouth, right? In order for that to happen and be considered to be a conversation that you can hear me, it's like vocalized, that it's uttered, right? I'm trying to say something. I'm not just saying aleph. It's like part of my class right now, right? And it has meaning, it has feeling, it has depth. It's coming out from my heart, basically, right? I'm trying to express myself, and I'm really trying to express like an emotion to when I'm saying any particular thing. That emotion is so spiritual and united with me that it doesn't actually make sound yet. That's the point we're making. It's something very, very refined to the point where it's just like it doesn't have the element, like the element that it's missing is basically the element of of afar, which is materialism, right? Because and when you sort of add on that aleph to it, the sound, that it comes out as that's like giving it the spiritual voice of the heart a materialism, the basic materialism that it like reverberates and makes sound. So that's what we're saying is when we say aleph, we don't really mean aleph as the letter aleph. We mean aleph as like the vowel sound aleph, right? That's what every single breath of the heart needs, a vowel, which we're calling vowels and generally just aleph here, right? And he's saying that it's not really an aleph in speech, because the aleph in speech is already part of dibur. It's not part of kol. It's not part of sound. It's like how you already, and then to that capacity, you might as well, instead of taking aleph, lamed and peh, you could take an aleph mem resh. Once you're breaking it down into describing a particular speech, it's a different conversation about how you chop up the sound. But underlying that, if I'm going to say amar, all of the aleph, mem, and resh, they're all hanging onto one vowel expression. I can manipulate it from a to a, but it's basically one breath, right, carrying that entire combination of chopped up speech. And we're saying if you're not making that sound to begin with, which is we're calling it sort of the origin of the aleph is the intermediary, then you can't express anything else either. Everyone following along?
Yeah.
Questions? It's a good place to hold here. So, till tomorrow.